A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you so much for tuning into another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us on the program today. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. Gotta tell you, it was really, really beautiful here in Central Virginia. In fact, I actually did go out, took some more pictures, so it might not be the summertime scene on the driveway here behind me. Beautiful, 80 degrees yesterday. Unbelievable. Great day to get out, knock on some doors, talk to engaged voters or perhaps unengaged voters in Virginia, because we have elections coming up next Tuesday, November the 5th. And as I've been writing about at Bearing Arms, this is an important election, not only for gun owners in Virginia, where this is absolutely critical, but this is an important election for gun owners all across the country, because gun control advocates are viewing Virginia as not only a great opportunity to make inroads, but to put together a game plan that they can then take to other states around the nation in the 2020 elections. And if they are able to flip the Virginia House of Delegates, the Virginia State Senate, to turn those two chambers into anti-gun legislative bodies, well, they're going to build a narrative around that Americans want this quote-unquote common sense gun safety regulation. Well, look just what happened in Virginia. And they're going to try to take that case perhaps to your state. I sat down with Jim Geraghty from National Review to talk about the upcoming elections in Virginia and why they are so critically important for Second Amendment advocates all across the nation. Take a look and a listen. Jim Geraghty, is great talking with you again, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Cam.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. We are a week away from Election Day. Well, a week and a day away from Election Day in New Jersey and Virginia. We haven't actually talked a lot about New Jersey here on the program, in large part because I fear that New Jersey is going to remain as anti-gun as it has been. Virginia, on the other hand, it's been 20 years since we've seen a gun control bill become law in the state of Virginia. And Democrats are running hard on gun control in the state of Virginia this year.
They are. Listeners with good memories may recall that in 2017, the first kind of big statewide elections after President Trump had been elected, Virginia Democrats were fired up. They were convinced they were going to have a good year. Virginia Republicans were like, no, we're probably going to be fine. We have nice big majorities in the state House and the state Senate. And they almost lost their majorities. They came really close. They have one-seat majorities. People may remember the footage of that race, I believe, down in Virginia Beach, where they had to settle. It came out to an exact tie, and they had to settle it by picking a name out of a hat.
Yep.
That preserved the Republican majority in the state, which this is not the way you want to win. Generally you want to have nice big majorities. So they kept majorities, but obviously, you've got a one-seat majority, which means you don't have much wiggle room, so to speak. After a shooting in Virginia Beach earlier this year, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam said he wanted to have a special session to pass gun control bills. He wanted to have universal background checks, and I believe it was also a one gun a month policy. And by golly, we've got to do something. The special session lasted about an hour. The state Senate and Virginia, the Republican majorities in the state Senate and state House said, look, they haven't even completed the investigation of this shooting. This is a political stunt. This is blatantly an effort to try to pressure us before the election. We are adjourning until after the election. And the Virginia Democrats said, fine, we're going to run on this. And so far they are running on this. Every town and all the other gun control groups are dumping money into this. And I think, if you're a Republican, is there potential you could have a good year and keep your majorities? Sure. I don't think you'd want to count on it based on what we're seeing right now. But this is probably going to be a hard-fought race all the way down to the wire.
Absolutely. And there are, first of all, as you mentioned, gun control groups are spending heavily to the tune of millions of dollars. And they're not doing this in every race. They're focusing on about 14 different races in both the House and the Senate. As you said, there's really just, slim majorities in both of those chambers. And there are some, and there have been, I think, some unforced errors on the part of Republicans. Delegate Nick Freitas won his reelection in 2017, I think with 66% of the vote. He is a write-in candidate this year because of apparently his campaign manager did not manage to get the campaign paperwork filed on time and correctly. And so he's not actually on the ballot, Jim. And again, when you're looking at every one of these races and every one of these districts being so critically important, things like that could absolutely, imagine, 2017 winning control of the House of Delegates due to a coin flip. Imagine losing it because an incumbent in a safe district didn't get their paperwork filed correctly.
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is kick around Virginia Republicans, in part because they talk to me, and I try to, but there's been a bunch of frustrating developments this cycle. Not just, people, obviously, listeners are probably saying, how can you possibly be in a rough shape? This is a state that has Ralph Northam, Governor Blackface, or maybe he was the Klansman, one of the other.
We're not sure which one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Governor Coonman, which he said it was his nickname in his yearbook there, and Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who had a sexual assault allegations. Plus, you had Mark Herring, the Attorney General, who also had blackface in his younger days. People will be looking and saying, "My God, how can Virginia Republicans not be set to have a great year?" Look, Virginia state legislatures races do not usually get a ton of attention and generate a ton of excitement. A lot of people barely know who their state legislator is. And also it's worth noting that the Virginia state legislature is a part-time job. Generally, this is not something that, you have to really want to do it. I decided to run up the numbers, Cam, just out of curiosity, because I live up, what I call up in City Woods here in Fairfax County. Chap Peterson is our state senator, and when I got my sample ballot, I was, a little disappointed to find no one was running against him. What's more, Greg, is no one's running against my state House representative either. So I ran through the numbers. There are 7 House districts with a Republican on the ballot, but no Democrat. So if you're a Republican, you're feeling really good about that. In most of these races, you have a Libertarian candidate or somebody else running third party or write-in or something. But obviously, if you're one of the 2 major party candidates, you're probably got a big advantage. There are 27 House districts with a Democrat running, but no Republican running.
Wow.
So in more than a quarter, the Democrats already have this race won, and one of them I was kind of, was really kind of was bothersome. This is the 57th district, which is right around Charlottesville, a little bit of the county next to it. Basically, it's University of Virginia county. So you're going to have a lot of college kids. You're going to have a lot of Democrats, university professors. Okay, it's going to be a tough spot for a Republican to win. That having been said, it's a retiree. The incumbent is retiring. The Democrat who won the primary is now pretty much already assured of that district. If you don't have anybody on the ballot, you can't go out and win them. And the situation in the Senate is pretty similarly bad. There are 4 Senate districts with a Republican running but no Democrat. There are 15 Senate districts with a Democrat running but no Republican. Interestingly enough, one of those districts was District number 25, where the state senator is Cree Deeds, who was running for governor a couple of cycles ago.
That's right. And going back 2 years to 2017, one of the things that Democrats were very focused on, they said, we want to run in every district. And it doesn't matter if it's a safe Republican district. We want to have a Democrat on the ballot. That's one of the reasons why they were able to make the gains that they were able to make in 2017. You can't score an upset if you're not competing. And I got to tell you, that's really disappointing to hear, 15 Senate seats, but again, almost a quarter, actually almost half of what Democrats need to take control of the House of Delegates. They can bank on that before a vote is even cast, because in 25 of those districts, as you say, there's not even a Republican on the ballot.
Yep. Don't have to spend any resources. Don't have to run ad time. No, look, obviously you're going to have your toughest time recruiting candidates when the opposing party has a big advantage.
Sure.
So granted, that is, there's a reason you have a tough time finding candidates to run in these districts. That having been said, if you you can say the political environment right now is not great for Republicans. But if there was a wave, you'd want to have as many candidates on the ballot as possible to be in a position to enjoy that wave. And separately, Cam, look, in a year that began with these, 3 egregious scandals engulfing the top 3 statewide officials in this state, you never know who's going to get caught in bed with a goat, Cam. You never know when somebody's going to have some sudden giant revelation that completely changes voters' opinion of them, and you want to have somebody on the ballot. At the congressional level, Republicans won Wiener seat. Now I think it scores out like Democrats plus 27 in the Cook partisan vote. This is a heavily Democratic district, but lo and behold, after Anthony Weiner had his really egregious scandal, the voters in the district were like, you know what, I'm voting for the Republicans. Just for this cycle, I can't vote for this guy. It was too late for them to do a Torricelli maneuver, and that's where the situation was.
So why do you think it is that Ralph Northam, Democrats continue to embrace him, and Justin Fairfax and Mark Herring? It's almost like the party decided, well, this isn't going to be a scandal. And they refused to let it become one. And eventually the media lost interest. I mean, the last we heard from Ralph Northam.
They're all all those blackface.
All those blackface politicians look alike to me. Yes. Last we heard from Ralph Northam, he was going to get to the bottom of this. He was going to figure out who was in that picture. Right. Mm-hmm. And the medical school that the yearbook was a part of, they did their own investigation and said, we can't really figure out who this was. And then this story just kind of quietly faded away, Jim.
It's the immaculate yearbook photo, Cam. It just happened. It just spontaneously appeared. No one could explain it.
It's a miracle.
Yeah, so we can. So here's the thing. It is worth noting that this was a big deal in the local media and in institutions like the Washington Post. And I mean, they didn't call him an austere scholar or anything like that. Like their comparisons were Baghdadi, but for people who complain, the media, never wanted to cover it. No, the media was interested in covering this in January and February. And as it got to March, I think it was Jonathan Martin of the New York Times. The New York Times was, isn't it strange the way this scandals engulfed the state and then they simply slowly faded away? Gee, amazing how that happened, whereas there wasn't this steady drumbeat. And there were two things. There are a couple of things that would matter here. The first is that Ralph Northam is not capable. It is not eligible to run for another term.
Right.
If there was a prospect of Democrats having to go into 2021, that year sounds like science fiction, and now it's just a few years away. If election day 2021, Northam was going to have to run for re-election, then you'd see Democrats freaking out and saying, we've got to get rid of this guy. We can't have this guy at the top of the ticket, et cetera, et cetera. Very much like I would use the term Mexican standoff, but I suggest it probably would offend somebody who's very sensitive these days, Cam. But let's just say a mutually assured destruction pact existed between Northam and Fairfax and Herring because there was no way to get any one of them to go away without people explaining, well, wait a second, why did you get rid of this guy, but you're allowing that guy to stay into office? Mm-hmm. So the ordinarily, the people who, this is where the situation where in ordinary circumstances, Justin Fairfax would say, Ralph Northam and I have worked together for a long time, and I respect him a great deal. I know he's a changed man, but this issue has just become too much of a distraction, and it's time for the state to move on. The situation where he could gently nudge the guy out of office, and then, of course, he would assume the offices of the governorship. That couldn't happen in this situation because Fairfax had his own allegations to deal with. And the guy, maybe the chief law enforcement officer in the state could do it. Nope, Herring's got his own too. So you put all of that together, coupled with the fact that, again, Democratic interest groups could see the score on this and recognize, well, if we get rid of one of these guys, people are going to because the pressure would come to get rid of the other two guys. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the House, State Assembly Speaker Kirk Cox, a Republican, would take control. And, well, we can't have that. That's the truly worst scenario, Cam. That's the disaster the state could never, could never survive.
Yeah.
And my suspicion is that's why all the people who ordinarily would get really upset by a politician wearing blackface. Obviously, African Americans would be very offended. I think basically Americans of any stripe would be offended. I think even good progressives like Justin Trudeau would be offended by someone wearing blackface.
Come see, come saw.
And of course, all of it was in everybody's political self-interest to register their strong disapproval and then do nothing. And this is this gave me flashback to the Bill Clinton stuff, Cam, because in 1998, when at the height of the Lewinsky scandal, a very popular thing for Democrats to do was to say, this is appalling, the president who's used terrible judgments. I call on him to resign. And Bill Clinton would say, no, I'm not going to do that. And the Democrat would then say, okay, then, let's move on. It's like the sheer process of rejecting the demand. Well, okay, there's nothing else we can do. I'm not that angry about it.
Yeah. So, I said probably a week or so ago that this election in Virginia should be a canary in the coal mine for gun owners around the country because if they are able to flip the House and the Senate, and Virginia does become an anti-gun state from the governor on down. Gun control groups are going to try to replicate that all around the country in 2020. And while obviously we're paying very close attention to the presidential race, Republicans and frankly pro-Second Amendment politicians enjoy a majority in a majority of state legislatures, and gun control advocates, they're not going to put all of their eggs in that federal basket of, well, let's flip the Senate, we already control the House, let's take back the White House. They would love to do that, and they'll be spending hundreds of millions of dollars to try to do that, but they also know how important it is to put in place at the state level anti-gun regimes as well. How important do you think this race is for 2020? And how much attention, again, it's tough to get Virginians to pay attention to these races, but how much attention do you think people outside of the state of Virginia should be paying to this race?
They should be paying very close attention, because if this playbook works here, they're going to try to replicate it in every state, everywhere. And maybe it would not succeed in the Wyoming of the world. But by and large, there are a whole bunch of states in that upper Midwest, and even in the South, Georgia, North Carolina, in the West, upper Midwest. I mean, there's all kinds of places where this playbook could conceivably work again. And in addition to all these races where Republicans are not running, as we talked about earlier, look, these are often a whole bunch of the same places where they lost U.S. House seats. The suburbs used to be areas the Republican Party could run reasonably well. And when you talk about focusing on the state legislative races, Cam, one of the things that made me feel good about being a man of the right, and particularly during the Obama era, you could look to the National Rifle Association, you could look to groups like ALEC, the various Koch seminar network groups and groups like that, and you could do it. They paid attention to the little stuff. They paid attention to the state legislative races that weren't sexy and romantic and exciting and the sort of things people paid a lot of attention to. You don't see state legislators slow jamming the news with Jimmy Fallon. That Obama excited a bunch of Democrats, and he got them to show up in presidential years. Conservatives, particularly during the Tea Party era, were doing a great job of showing up in these special elections and in these lower races. And lo and behold, as the gun Second Amendment various movements have recognized, this stuff matters. What kind of laws get passed, what kind of regulations get enacted, what kind of personnel gets appointed. All this stuff matters. And if you stop paying attention to that, you start losing these battles, and the consequences can be pretty darn big.
Absolutely. Jim Geraghty with National Review. Thank you, as always, sir, for joining us on the program today. It's great talking with you again.
Always enjoy it, Kim. I'm hoping we have good news to talk about in a week and a day, but keep your fingers crossed. And if you're in Virginia, pay attention. And if you're in my situation, I guess you just got to write somebody out.
Jim Geraghty joining us here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. All right, let's get to another story here before we get to our hero of the day, our deed of the day, and our recidivism report. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, I'm still puzzled over this. So back in August, Governor Cuomo released this campaign pledge that he wanted Democratic candidates to take called the Make America Safer Pledge, and nobody did it. Nobody did it. None of the candidates, I don't even think, took notice of this. So Cuomo decided, maybe they just didn't hear me. And so over the weekend, he had another event where he again reiterated this pledge, which basically demands that Democrats who are running for president sign on and sign off on his SAFE Act law there in New York State. And Governor Cuomo says, well, listen, the Make America Safer pledge, you got to promise to ban quote-unquote assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. You got to demand universal background checks. Basically everything that these Democrats are already doing, with perhaps the exception of establishing a quote-unquote mental health database that Governor Cuomo believes should be in effect. But everything else, these candidates are already on board with. Some of them are actually going farther than Andrew Cuomo. Beto O'Rourke says, sure, we can ban these guns, but we need to take them away, too. Governor Cuomo, the last report, isn't even calling for that. But I did find it fascinating that Governor Andrew Cuomo was patting himself on the back and talking up the successes of the New York SAFE Act, because there have actually been a lot of failures with the SAFE Act. First of all, Governor Cuomo demanded that there be a 7-round limit to magazines in New York State. There aren't many 7-round magazines, and so a court actually struck that down. Now the law is, at least in the counties that are enforcing this aspect of the SAFE Act, you can have a 10-round magazine, but you can only have 7 rounds in it. You can't have a 20-round magazine with 7 rounds in it, which again, this is asinine. This is so stupid. And there are some counties in New York State that aren't even enforcing this aspect of the law at all because of how confusing it is. There was another aspect of the law that required mandatory background checks for every ammunition purchase in New York State. State police can't figure out how to do it. So that part of the law is not being enforced. Pistol re-registration requirements. It's estimated hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers have not complied. Registering your quote-unquote assault weapon. Again, estimated that perhaps as many as 1 million New Yorkers did not comply with that mandate. Basically, the one thing that the SAFE Act has been doing is putting people in prison for possessing a firearm without a license, which, by the way, is perfectly legal in the vast majority of states that don't have gun licensing laws. So something that is not even a crime in Virginia could put you in prison for at least 3.5 years in New York State. And that's where the bulk of these arrests are coming. They're simply charges, nonviolent, possessory offenses. And by the way, they're not being prosecuted, equally across the state of New York. The vast majority of these cases are being prosecuted in just 2 of New York City's 5 boroughs, Brooklyn and the Bronx. And as Emily Bazelon at Slate Magazine pointed out, probably 3 or 4 months ago now, in a new podcast called Charged, where she actually went and she sat in the Brooklyn gun court for several months. Most of these individuals who are facing years behind prison are young black men with no violent histories at all. That's the legacy of Andrew Cuomo's SAFE Act. And that's what he wants every other Democrat to sign on to. Sad thing is, even if they don't sign on to his pledge, their plans are going to have that exact same disparate impact. All right, let's get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivism report from New Mexico, where you got a lot of lawmakers who are calling for things like red flag laws, and they put a quote-unquote universal background check law in the books last year, while ignoring the career criminals in their midst. This young man, 23 years of age, Martin Rivera, a known felon, charged in Taos County, New Mexico, with murder. And as it turns out, this is another individual who absolutely should have been behind bars. Instead, he got a sweetheart plea deal. Check out the facts of this case. Back in April of this year, just a few months ago, Martin Rivera accepted a plea deal this is according to the Taos News, accepted a plea deal in a case that charged him in another series of crimes from April of 2017, including stabbing a man in the parking lot of a grocery store in Taos and robbing 2 people at gunpoint. So he stabbed somebody, armed robbery, he gets a plea deal, and the plea deal sentences him to no prison time at all. Instead, he was sent to the Rehoboth McKinley Christian Healthcare Services, which is a drug treatment facility in Gallup, New Mexico. Yeah, how about that? In April of this year. Now, Martin Rivera has been charged with second-degree murder, 2 counts of shooting at or from a motor vehicle, tampering with evidence, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, after the murder of Javier Munoz, who was shot in Taos on October the 19th. The 33-year-old passed away later that day at Holy Cross Medical Center. And again, Martin Rivera, suspect in this case, should have been behind bars for years to come for that stabbing and armed robbery. Instead, slap on the wrist, sent to drug treatment. Less than a year later, he's charged with murder. All right, our armed citizen story of the day from South Carolina, Greenville County, South Carolina, where individuals have been arrested following an assault and a shooting at a buy-low in Greenville. According to the Sheriff's Office, 26-year-old Robert Harold Matson, arrested and charged with assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature. After this, he charged a man and placed him in a chokehold during an altercation there at the Bila. Now, unfortunately for the suspect, his intended victim was armed and was able to shoot his attacker in self-defense. He was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, remains there for medical treatment. A victim also transported to the hospital, is expected to recover. When Mr. Mattson gets out of the hospital again, he will be taken to the jail on those assault and battery charges. And again, that darn citizen, safe and sound today. Finally, our good deed of the day from Grand Junction, Colorado, where a school resource officer going above and beyond to help out a student who really needed a little bit of a pick-me-up. Eric Worth is a junior at Central High School in Grand Junction. He has autism. He is a hard worker, according to his teacher, shows up to school every day on time. And he rides his bike to school every day, but his teacher noticed that he was getting a little big for his bike. And that is when Mike Dixon, who's a school resource officer there at Central High School, stepped in. He, with the help of other school resource officers, able to purchase Eric a brand new bike. Eric was able to add some lights to his bike so he can be seen day or night. And again, this was just done because Mike Dixon felt like this kid needed it. And so, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, Mike Dixon in Central High School in Grand Junction, Colorado, we thank you, sir, for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Now, coming up on tomorrow's program, we're going to talk with our friend Rob Pincus, Second Amendment advocate, self-defense instructor, firearms instructor. We'll be talking about the Second Amendment rally, which is coming up this coming Saturday, November the 2nd, Washington, D.C. I think there are now so many speakers that the rally's been expanded, 12:30 to 4 p.m., on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol. We're going to give you more details on the next edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. We hope that we can see you there. In the meantime, thanks for being a part of today's program. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the program as a podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com podcast as well. You can also subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. Make sure you never miss a program. Thanks, as always, for watching, for listening, and for spreading the word. And we'll see you back here tomorrow with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.